Coming up on tonight's This Week in Politics.
Of course, she will live on in what she did to improve the law and the lives of all of us. And yet, still, Ruth is gone, and we grieve.
As a nearly three-decade career on the United States Supreme Court comes to an end with the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the political battle to replace her is already underway.
We will work to fill the Supreme Court vacancy, and I look forward to receiving and reviewing the President's nomination in the near future.
In Louisville, Kentucky, racial tensions again flare as no police officers are charged directly for the shooting death of Breonna Taylor in her apartment as police carried out a search warrant.
According to Kentucky law, the use of force by Mattingly and Cosgrove was justified to protect themselves. This justification bars us from pursuing criminal charges in Miss Breonna Taylor's death.
In Washington, the president declines to commit to a peaceful transfer of power should he lose the upcoming November election.
Peaceful transfer of power.
We want to get rid of the ballots, and you'll have a very peaceful. There won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation.
Also, Sioux Falls City leaders discuss COVID-19 response as cases and hospitalizations continue to creep upward. Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Allen. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg died the evening of Friday, September 18th. As that news was breaking, the president was on a campaign trip in Minnesota and learned of her death shortly after speaking to supporters.
Whether you agreed or not, she was an amazing woman who led an amazing life.
As I heard President Clinton talk about how she had exceeded all expectations, I think we're at a moment in time where our democracy and the people voting and where we are right now, we have to exceed expectations. And that's why this is so emotional for so many people.
Emotions and passions are running high about this seat on the U.S. Supreme Court. 4 years ago, Senate Republicans blocked then-President Obama's nominee to replace the late Antonin Scalia, Judge Merrick Garland, saying it was an election year and the winner of that year's presidential election should choose the nominee. Now, 4 years later, Senate Republicans are saying it is within the president's purview to put forth a nominee and the Senate's duty to consider that nominee regardless of the presidential election, which is now just 5 weeks away.
The American people re-elected our majority in 2016. They strengthened it further in 2018 because we pledged to work with President Trump on the most critical issues facing our country. The federal judiciary was right at the top of the list.
It's perfectly true that the Senate did not vote on President Obama's final Supreme Court nominee. That's something that the Senate can choose to do. Any Senate, led by either party, can decline to take up a nominee. That's the Senate's constitutional prerogative. At the time, we felt that since voters had recently chosen a Republican-led Senate, while the president was a Democrat on his way out of office, the new president should choose the next Supreme Court nominee.
Democrats in the Senate crying foul, saying this is a case of Republicans wanting to have it both ways in a way that suits them, and that they're violating a precedent they set 4 years ago. Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar.
The first move is to push our Republican colleagues, not just us here in the Senate, but also the people of this country, to say, do your job and look at the fact that you yourself set a precedent. You set a precedent that you now have to respect.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer decried the Republican stance, his comments directed toward Majority Leader McConnell.
If Leader McConnell presses forward, the Republican majority will have stolen 2 Supreme Court seats, 4 years apart, using completely contradictory rationales. This was McConnell's rule when Merrick Garland was nominated by President Obama. The American people should have a voice in the selection of their next Supreme Court justice. Therefore, this vacancy should not be filled until we have a new president. Certainly isn't applying now.
Democrats have openly said this week they will take some sort of action if the Republicans push a Senate nominee through. They suggested changing the makeup of the Supreme Court and adding more justices, they say, to provide more balance to the court. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has said nothing is off the table, including another impeachment proceeding against the president, prompting this response from House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy.
If she tries to move for an impeachment based upon the president following the Constitution, I think there'll be a move on the floor to have her no longer, or the question of her being Speaker. She may think she has a quiver, we do too.
The entire process took a big step forward yesterday when the president announced his pick to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the United States Supreme Court.
It is my honor to nominate one of our nation's most brilliant and gifted legal minds to the Supreme Court. She is a woman of unparalleled achievement, towering intellect, sterling credentials, and unyielding loyalty to the Constitution, Judge Amy Coney Barrett.
If confirmed, I would not assume that role for the sake of those in my own circle, and certainly not for my own sake. I would assume this role to serve you. I would discharge the judicial oath, which requires me to administer justice without respect to persons, do equal right to the poor and rich, and faithfully and impartially discharge my duties under the United States Constitution.
We will, of course, continue to follow this course of events as they move forward. Next on This Week in Politics, Sioux Falls city leaders discuss COVID-19 as both case numbers and hospitalizations creep upward. And President Trump's answer to a question about the November election leads to a response from both Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi. We'll be right back with that here on KSFY. Welcome back to This Week in Politics here on KSFY. A report this week from the White House Coronavirus Task Force says South Dakota remains one of the country's COVID-19 hotspots. In Sioux Falls specifically, there has been an uptick in recent days in the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases and hospitalizations directly tied to COVID-19 infections. Sioux Falls Public Health Director Jill Franken says the demand for testing in this area has also gone up. When it comes to a COVID-19 vaccine, Franken says an official timetable hasn't been given as to when one might be widely available.
That's the really big push right now, is to be prepared for the nuances of this kind of vaccine that's different from other vaccines that we have had to manage and deal with. So that's what we're doing right now.
Vice President Mike Pence is asking governors around the country to help build confidence for a COVID-19 vaccine. During his weekly conference call, the vice president said they are working around the clock to create a vaccine and that governors need to let their citizens know it will be safe. Recent polling shows 62% of Americans believe pressure from the president will force the FDA to cut corners on a vaccine. The Second Judicial Circuit Court, which covers Minnehaha and Lincoln counties, is citing the increasing number of COVID-related hospitalizations as a reason for suspending all scheduled jury trials. Presiding Judge Robin Howman issued that guidance Tuesday afternoon. It is expected that trials will be suspended until at least October 13th, if not longer. The state of Minnesota opening up a first-of-its-kind COVID-19 saliva testing facility in Duluth. Testing will be free to all Minnesotans who believe they need a COVID-19 test, including those who don't show any symptoms. The state does plan to open up 9 more sites across the state. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem has called for a special session for the state legislature to figure out a plan to spend more than $1 billion in federal funds the state has received to help deal with the coronavirus pandemic. That special session set to take place on October 5th. South Dakota has until December 30th to spend all of that coronavirus relief fund money. The November election is now a little more than 5 weeks away. As part of South Dakota's push to register eligible voters, Secretary of State Steve Barnett is making the rounds to recruit eligible voters. The secretary making a stop at Northern State in Aberdeen this past Tuesday. Students were able to pick up a generic sample ballot to learn more about the state and local decisions that they can help make.
We just want to create an awareness for really all age levels, but especially college students. There can be kind of a transient crowd, so to speak. People come and go, but and some of them may have gotten registered at the high school level, but some of them may not have been 18 yet when they graduated.
And by the way, the voter registration deadline in South Dakota is coming up on October 19th. On Wednesday, the president was asked by a reporter during a White House briefing if he would oversee a smooth transfer of power should he lose the presidential election. Here's that exchange.
Right here. Mr. President, real quickly, win, lose, or draw in this election, will you commit here today for a peaceful transferal of power after the election? And there has been rioting in Louisville, there's been rioting in many cities across this country, red and your so-called red and blue states. Will you commit to making sure that there is a peaceful transferal of power after the election?
Well, we're going to have to see what happens. You know that I've been complaining very strongly about the ballots, and the ballots are a disaster.
I understand that, but people are rioting. Do you commit to making sure that there's a peaceful transferal of power?
We want to get rid of the ballots, and we'll have a very peaceful. There won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation. The ballots are out of control. You know it. And you know who knows it better than anybody else? The Democrats know it better than anybody else. Go ahead.
Well, those comments from the president were met with a response Thursday morning by both Senate Majority Leader McConnell and House Speaker Pelosi, both saying there will be an orderly transfer of power should the president lose on November 3rd. When we come back on This Week in Politics, tensions boil over in Louisville, Kentucky, as 3 police officers involved in the shooting death of a woman in her apartment are not charged in her death. Welcome back to This Week in Politics here on KSFY. This week it was announced that 3 Louisville, Kentucky police officers implicated in the shooting death of a woman named Breonna Taylor in her apartment would not be facing charges in her death. One officer is charged with wanton endangerment for putting 3 people nearby in danger as the result of opening fire. On March 13th, police officers executed a warrant at Taylor's apartment for a suspect that did not live there. Taylor's boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, says he did not know it was police officers coming into the apartment that night. He says they didn't announce themselves ahead of time. As a result, Walker opened fire. The officers responded and killed Taylor in the process. Kentucky's Attorney General says under state law, the officers were technically defending themselves, meaning they cannot be charged in her death.
I understand that as a black man, how painful this is. And which is why it was so incredibly important for make sure that we did everything we possibly could to uncover every fact. My heart breaks for the loss of Miss Taylor.
There were riots in Louisville Wednesday night. 2 police officers were shot during those riots. We're told they are expected to recover. The FBI continues a separate investigation into the death of Breonna Taylor. This week on the floor of the U.S. House, South Dakota Congressman Dusty Johnson spoke on the importance of journalism in the United States at this specific moment in time. We're going to leave you tonight with those comments. I'm Brian Allen. From all of us to all of you, good night from Courthouse Square.
Well, it was Thomas Jefferson that said that if he had to choose, he would prefer newspapers without government over government without newspapers. Now, that is quite a dramatic statement, but I think it highlights how critical journalism is to holding government accountable. Indeed, as my lapel pin notes tonight, democracy demands journalism. Now, journalism is not a comfortable duty. I suspect every good reporter has faced the wrath of a wronged politician and has had disgruntled viewers or readers or listeners cancel their patronage. It's tempting for us to be among the disgruntled, but if we want a free society, we have to support a free press. One whose loyalty is not to partisan endeavors or to stoking division and conflict, but rather is to the truth. Yes, Madam Speaker, democracy does demand journalism. Thank you, and I yield back.